In my high school psychology class, there is a really fun exercise that we like to do. It's not very nice of an exercise, but it's kind of okay because we're not doing an experiment on real people. But basically, we watched a snippet from Winnie the Pooh, and our job, the assignment that the teacher gave us, was to formally diagnose all of the characters in Winnie the Pooh. For example, Pooh has this really weird obsession with always eating honey, and he can't always control his instincts. Or Rabbit always has to stay really organized. Or Owl is always really off in his own world, and he doesn't understand what's going on around him. He doesn't pay attention to the details. And Piglet has anxiety, and Eeyore has depression. Things like that. So here's the fun part of this part of the class. This is your chance, if you haven't done already, to kind of diagnose me and think about why and how I told this story. Because if you think about that, it'll make it a lot easier for you to understand why and how you can tell your own stories when you're applying to scholarships, when you're applying to universities. So first of all, let's talk about why I chose a story format, why I always choose a story format for all of my essays and personal statements. So you're only given 500 words usually in these essays, very rarely more than 500 words, sometimes if you're lucky 800 or 1000 words. And you only have 500 words to give someone you don't know at all a glimpse into your past, your present, and your future. And the reason why you want to do this is because one of the best ways to determine your future success is what you've done in the past. Now, I know there are studies that have shown that GPA and SAT scores don't always necessarily equate to success in the future as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as even a college student. But if you can emphasize something that's not related to the quantitative aspects of yourself, such as your GPA, if you can talk about how the theme of resilience plays in your life and tell it in a story format, it keeps the reader engaged. They cling onto your every word. You get your message across a lot better when they do that. And it gives them a glimpse into who you are. The whole point of the personal statement is it has to be personal. The reason why I knew I was telling the correct story is because every time I have to read it out loud, I feel the pain inside of my chest, inside of my brain as I'm reliving these events in the past. If it hurts a little bit, it might not necessarily be good. It might still be in a very crude thought format that hasn't been fleshed out and written out into a good story yet, but at least you know it's honest. And a story also gives you, the reader, a chance to feel what it's like to be me. It's memorable, and a story carries a lot more weight. Now, why did I choose to write from a child's point of view, or POV? So small voices and smaller words are often forgotten and seldom heard. When I talk about small voices and smaller words, am I talking about children, immigrants, people who lack education, or their children? In this situation, I was a child, and I was a child of two immigrant parents. Everybody within my family, except for myself, was born outside of the United States. So access to education was always a bit difficult, and that's why education, why scholarship, why helping others get into universities is really, really important to me. It's a core part of who I am, and it's something that I've gotten to become really good at and to share with people. So I wanted to talk about these small voices and these smaller words that are often forgotten and seldom heard. So there was a teacher that I had in middle school, actually. In middle school, there were two valedictorians, which sounds impossible, but there were two valedictorians. There was one other student, and there was myself. The other student, she actually had a higher GPA, but I was more involved with the school even than in middle school. I was a local spelling bee champion. I never made it to like the higher ranking spelling bees, but I was a local spelling bee champion. Fun fact, I won a spelling bee with the word virtuoso once, and I lost a spelling bee with the word otiosity one time. And I think otiosity translates to futility, to not having any results. So that was kind of funny. But anyways, so this teacher, she was an English teacher, tough as nails. She was known as being the most difficult middle school teacher on campus. But if you went to her course, if you went to her class, you would always walk away learning something. And that's why people enrolled for her course. So when it was time for me to give my valedictorian speech and I had to write it out, of course, I had a very similar like word limit. If you can think about it, my scholarship essay writing skills began when I was in middle school. I had maybe like a couple hundred words to write this essay that would be read in front of the entire school. And being the little spelling bee nerd that I was putting in all these really complicated and really difficult words into my essay. When I turned in my first draft of the essay to my teacher, the first thing she said to me was, keep it simple. And then she explained to me, think about who you're writing for. A lot of the people in the audience are parents who lack a formal education, who don't have English as their first language, who come from a less affluent personal background. They're not going to understand all these difficult words. So your goal is to write the best essay that you can, the best speech that you can. And write it especially for these people who will be listening to you, who are spending this time to be with their children, to be with you on this very special day. And in that case, using big words wasn't the best way to write my speech at the time. So I actually toned in all my vocabulary. And I threw in a joke at the beginning of the speech, just to like kind of shake things up at the beginning as well, just to connect with the audience on a more personal level. So the biggest lesson that I learned from that course was that communication always has to be understood, and sometimes you need to use smaller words. Sometimes to tell a more honest story, it's okay to use smaller words. I know that a lot of people don't have a lot of confidence within their own grammar or their own spelling capabilities, but I want to tell you that you have everything that it takes, knowledge-wise, in terms of grasping the English language, to tell your story and to write a good essay. And I was able to do it using fairly simple words for the majority of my essay. Towards the end, I did use larger words, but I could have toned it down a lot more than that. And I kind of attribute that to me being a younger writer at the time, and not having the experience of knowing when I should tone down on those more difficult words. And also the reason why I chose a child's point of view is because I wanted to show the disparity between my mother and my viewpoints, and how there's a certain amount of similarity between them too. Because when you have a parent that has certain situations like this, to be writing the story as a child, but to show a parent that isn't always capable of being what is expected of a parent, it kind of brings us both down on a similar level and puts a similarity between my mother and me that isn't apparent at first. I also wrote from a child's point of view because there's two aspects of life. There's surviving and living. When I was younger, some of it was based on survival, and at the same time, I would say that I actually had a very, very happy childhood, and I was always looking forward to the future. And as I write the story, you kind of see the transition from me, from my 5-year-old self to my 16-year-old self, which is the time when I was actually submitting the essay to the university. And you can kind of see like how my life kind of played out, and how something from the past influenced my decision to later want to become a psychologist. It's a story that spans over years in the making. And the reason why I chose these events, even though they're very difficult for me to talk about, is because they happened. And we cannot go back and change the past, and maybe we don't want to. But it's something that can be learned from. And that's the reason why I chose these particular events to talk about, is because I think that something can be learned from them, especially by you as you're writing these scholarship essays. And I also chose these events because my mother is not a villain. In the story, there isn't really a villain. Everyone is trying the best that they can, and sometimes it helps to be able to write your life as a story because it gives you a vantage point of understanding your life, looking back, giving meaning to events that didn't seem meaningful or seemed meaningless at the time. And the reason why I am sharing this stories with you is because the events really happened, and I was being honest when I wrote this essay, very, very honest. And I want to share the story that I personally believe got me into UC Berkeley. I want to share the story because I think it can help you acquire the funding that you need to follow your dreams, to get a degree. And I want you to get a degree because financial and emotional problems can make it harder to get a degree. That's the reality of it. Sometimes people don't have access to this funding. And because I want you to have this funding to get a degree, because a degree opens up doors to a lot of fulfilling career paths. I don't want to be a psychologist anymore, but if I had taken that path, I definitely would have gotten a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a PhD. But to get to the PhD, you have to follow all of the steps before that on the educational path. To get certain fulfilling careers, it's required to have a certain degree. And I want you to be on a fulfilling career path because I want you to succeed. And I want you to succeed because I love my students. That is the honest reason why I am sharing this story with you. I also chose to share the story because like, even though I'm not a psychologist, I feel like because of my previous experiences, I have this deeper understanding of people, and I like to think of people positively and to give them the benefit of the doubt before I jump to any conclusions. And I feel like UC Berkeley chose me because they knew I would do good in the world. Even though I wasn't going to be a psychologist, possibly, they had the impression that I would do good in the world. And I think that's the reason why they picked me. So sometimes, even then, as a high school student, you don't really have a lot of experience, but you have a lot of dreams and you have a lot of intentions. And sometimes that dreaming and those intentions are enough to push you through and to get you closer to actually fulfilling those dreams. Before you can achieve anything, you have to set a goal for yourself, set a dream for yourself, and take action upon it. So whatever your life situation is currently, right now, keep that in mind. Sometimes intention, if it's written in the right way, is enough to get you to the next step. And you never really know where your stories will take you. For example, during an interview, I was actually asked really casually, what do you like to do for fun? And I said, just off the top of my head, I like to get people into the schools and jobs of their dreams. So this is kind of a way of how I give back to the community and how I've been able to kind of fulfill that childhood dream of helping people who may not have the means of fulfilling some of their dreams otherwise. Thank you for joining me in this lesson, and I will see you in the next lesson.